Mysterious energy bursts, gigantic rings floating in space with no visible source, and strange objects in our Milky Way that flash in perfect slow pulses. These are space discoveries scientists still can't fully explain. Fast radio bursts, or FRBs, are some of the weirdest signals we pick up from space. Super short blasts of radio waves shooting at us from all over the sky. They only last a fraction of a second, maybe up to a few seconds at most, but in that tiny window, they're releasing absolutely massive amounts of energy. To put it in perspective, one of these bursts can release as much energy as the sun puts out over several days. We've been finding these things since 2007, and now with our better telescopes, we're catching hundreds of them. Some repeat at random times, others just happen once and never again. The big problem is, we can't figure out what's making them. Some are coming from these massive galaxies packed with old stars. Others are showing up in places where the conditions just don't seem right for creating these powerful blasts. A lot of scientists think they might be coming from magnetars, which are basically dead stars with magnetic fields so strong they're almost unimaginable. Or maybe they happen when dead stars collide with each other. But none of these explanations actually cover everything we're seeing. They don't explain why some repeat and others don't, or why some are coming from places that shouldn't even be able to create magnetars in the first place. Odd radio circles, which everyone just calls orcs, are these enormous, almost perfectly round rings that show up when we look at the sky with radio telescopes. But if you look with a regular telescope that sees visible light, you'll see nothing. Infrared cameras, X-ray detectors, nothing, just radio waves. And these things are absolutely gigantic. Some of them are hundreds of times wider than our entire galaxy. Astronomers started spotting these in really detailed radio images, and they were genuinely confused. We've confirmed several of them now. What's really strange is that most of these circles have a galaxy sitting right in the center. That galaxy being there doesn't explain the rings. If the galaxy was somehow creating these circles, we should see something when we look at it with other types of telescopes, but we don't. These circles only show up again in radio waves, which means whatever created them only left this one specific signature and nothing else. Nobody really knows why. There are some theories, like maybe they're ripples or shock waves in gas that got pushed outward by some huge explosion or event, but we still can't say for sure. There's this really weird object in our own galaxy called ASKAP J1-8320911. Radio telescopes and NASA's X-ray telescope found it because it keeps shooting out these pulses of radio waves and X-rays in this super regular rhythm. Every 44 minutes, it does a 2-minute burst, like clockwork. Now that might not sound like a big deal, but what makes this thing totally different from almost everything else we know about is how slow and regular it is. Normal stars don't pulse like this. There are things called pulsars that do flash, but those blink incredibly fast, dozens or hundreds of times every second, not once every 44 minutes. One of the strangest things about the leftover glow from the Big Bang is this area called the cold spot. So when the Big Bang happened, it left behind this faint radiation that fills the entire universe. We can map it out and measure its temperature in different directions. Normally we expect to see tiny random hot and cold patches in space, but the cold spot is different. When scientists mapped the whole sky looking at this leftover Big Bang radiation, the cold spot showed up as this unusually large area that's noticeably colder than the average temperature around it. On a sky map, it takes up a patch about 10 full moons wide if you line them up side by side. Could it be that there's this absolutely enormous empty region of space between us and this background radiation, and when the radiation passes through that emptiness, it loses some energy and appears cooler? That's one idea, but when researchers actually look for this supposed empty region by counting galaxies, they haven't found one that's big enough or empty enough to fully explain what we're seeing. And even if they did find it, the physics still wouldn't quite add up perfectly. Some researchers have also suggested some more trippy ideas, like maybe it's evidence of our universe bumping into another universe, leaving a sort of cosmic level dent behind, which is a fun idea, but pretty far out there, and they don't really have any real evidence to back that up. And continuing with this same idea, the cold spot isn't the only cold spot that we've observed. When you zoom way out and look at the universe on the largest possible scale, it's not evenly filled with galaxies like you might expect. It actually looks more like a sponge. You've got these really dense clusters of galaxies in some places, and then these absolutely enormous empty spaces called cosmic voids. Some of the biggest ones stretch across hundreds of millions of light years, but have way fewer galaxies in them than there should be if everything was spread out evenly. These voids aren't completely empty. There are still some galaxies floating around in on them, and there's dark matter too, but they're way emptier than you'd think, which raises questions about how the universe actually formed. Our standard models of how the universe works do a pretty good job of explaining how things expand and how matter is distributed on large scales, but they don't always predict this many giant voids. One of the craziest things discovered recently in space is right here in our own galaxy. Astronomers found this bizarre object called CWISE J1249 plus 3621. It's racing through our galaxy at about 1,000,000 miles per hour. That's fast enough that it's eventually going to escape the Milky Way's gravity completely and just fly off into intergalactic space. What makes this thing weird isn't just how fast it's going though, it's what it actually is, or more accurately, what it isn't. It's not a normal star. It's not really a planet either. Based on how heavy it is and how hot it is, it's stuck in this weird middle ground between a really small star and something called a brown dwarf, which is basically a failed star that never got hot enough or heavy enough to start burning like stars do. Astronomers still aren't totally sure what category to even put it in. One theory is that it used to be part of a pair of stars orbiting each other really close together, and when one of them exploded in a supernova, it basically launched this object out like a slingshot. Another idea is that it got too close to black holes in a really crowded star cluster, and the gravity just flung it away at this insane speed. It's strange. We don't have a good explanation for how something like this should even exist in the first place, or why we aren't finding way more objects like this if they can form. If you think of space as basically empty, you might be surprised to learn that there's actually this constant shower of tiny particles raining down on Earth all the time. They're called cosmic rays, and most of them are totally harmless, but every once in a while, scientists detect some that are carrying absolutely insane amounts of energy. Way more than anything we can produce in our most powerful particle accelerators here on Earth. These are called ultra-high energy cosmic rays. Astronomers still have no idea where these particles are coming from. Based on how magnetic fields in space bend their paths, you can sometimes track roughly what direction they come from, but sometimes they're traced back to areas of space that don't seem to have anything powerful enough to create them. That raises this huge question. What the hell is out there that can pump that much energy into a single particle? We have actual detectors set up watching the sky. We're recording these unbelievably energetic particles slamming into Earth, but we can't explain how they get so much energy or where they're coming from. When spacecraft fly past a planet to steal some of its orbital energy and speed up, engineers call this gravity assist. They expect the spacecraft's velocity to change in a way they can predict pretty accurately, but in a handful of missions that flew past Earth, something weird happened. The spacecraft came out going slightly faster than the math said they should. This got named the Flyby Anomaly. Scientists still can't agree on why it's happening. This effect is super tiny. We're talking about speed differences measured in millimeters per second, but the fact that it happens at all is pretty strange. The anomaly showed up during Earth flybys of missions like NASA's Near Shoemaker spacecraft, the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission, and a few others. In each case, the instruments measured a small speed boost that couldn't be explained by normal gravity or by the spacecraft firing its thrusters. Scientists have tried all kinds of explanations. Maybe it's something weird with atmospheric drag, maybe it's just measurement errors, but none of these explanations have been accepted by everyone or actually confirmed. One of the weirder discoveries from deep sky surveys, especially with the James Webb Space Telescope, are these huge free-floating planets drifting through space with no star in sight. And not small rogue planets, I'm talking about Jupiter-sized or larger, and occasionally two of these planets move together. We used to think planets always form around stars and stay in orbit. Sure, a planet could get kicked out of its system occasionally. The number of these giant loners, and the fact that some are moving in pairs, doesn't match what scientists often predict. In regions like the Orion Nebula, astronomers are finding hundreds of these free-floating worlds, and it isn't clear how they ended up there. Some scientists think these planets might form on their own, collapsing directly from clouds of gas and dust instead of forming around a star. Others think they could be flung out of crowded young star clusters, but neither explanation fully makes sense. Too many of them, the ones traveling in pairs, are especially puzzling. The South Atlantic Anomaly is basically a spot in space above Earth where our planet's magnetic field gets unusually weak. Normally, Earth's magnetic field does a pretty good job of protecting satellites and astronauts from harmful charged particles that get trapped in these radiating radiation belts around our planet called the Van Allen belts. But over the South Atlantic Ocean and parts of South America, that protective magnetic shield dips down closer to Earth's surface, so satellites flying through this area get hit with way more radiation than they would anywhere else at the same height above Earth. Earth's magnetic field isn't perfectly centered or symmetrical, it's kind of lopsided. Space agencies actually have to plan their missions around this. Some satellites will shut down their sensitive instruments while passing through the anomaly just to avoid damage or getting bad readings. The Hubble Space Telescope won't even try to make certain observations while it's in this zone because the extra radiation just screws up its detectors. Earth's magnetic field shifts and changes over decades and centuries, and the South Atlantic anomaly is growing and moving in ways that scientists don't fully understand yet. So trying to track it and predict where it'll be is an ongoing challenge. That's been the video for today. I'll catch you, yes you specifically, next time.